Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 39, verse 3. Chapter 39, verse 3. Yosef has found himself now in the house of Potiphar. He's been sold, he's been sent to Egypt, and somehow he ends up in the house of Potiphar. Potiphar is some type of prominent minister, it seems, in Egypt. Verse 3. Vayara Dunav ki Hashem ito. His master Potiphar saw that God was with him. And everything that Yosef would do, God would bring success to his hands. This is pretty impressive for Potiphar to have such a theological understanding of God. It's pretty good. What exactly is going on here? Ramban on Pasuk Gimel, Ki Hashem Bito. Rashi says, he starts off by quoting Rashi, Shem Shemayim Shagur Befiv, that the name of heaven was fluent in Yosef's mouth. Yosef was always talking about God. So what it means that God was with him, it means that Potiphar appreciated or recognized that Yosef was always talking about God help me with this, God help me with that, hopefully God will help me with this, etc. That's the Rashi's pshat. Ramban says ve'enu nira. He says, I don't think that's the pshat. Avavayara adonav ki Hashem ito, ki yatzlichu ma'asav b'chol eis, Yosef b'kol adam. There's something with this fellow Yosef. Everything he does is successful, more so than the average person. So Potiphar says, look, I don't know what's what, but all I know is it all comes out roses when Yosef does it. And it happens enough times, it must be that God is with him. Says Ramban, this wouldn't be the first place in Chumash. When people of the area come to Yitzchak and they say, we see that God is with you. What does that mean that they see that God is with him? It means we see you're succeeding. So Yosef finds favor in the eyes of Potiphar. So he gives Yosef a prominent position within the household. And everything that he has, he gives to Yosef. The Yosef is totally in charge of whatever's going on with Potiphar's assets in the field. Amru, Melachesh v'nichnas, Melachesh v'yotze. A fascinating thing. The Medrash has it that Yosef, that Potiphar found that as Yosef is coming in and out, he's always whispering, he's always muttering, he's always talking under his breath. Amrlo mizog roschin v'haroschin, mizog poshrin v'haposhrin. So basically, like whatever he asks of Yosef, Yosef just sort of says something or another, and it happens. And so it seems that Yosef was regularly praying to God, and God was helping him. So we have right now 3 pshatim. So one is that just Yosef would talk about Hashem a lot. One is that Potiphar doesn't know anything about God and Yosef. All he knows is Yosef is always successful. And at some point he says, it must be God is helping him. And the third is there's sort of more of a mysterious thing that he always sees Yosef's always whispering something or another, and things seem to be working out well. Skipping a few lines. Lo yoda es Hashem. Can't expect the Egyptians to have a good sense of monotheism. So then we're compelled to understand, what does it mean that this Egyptian minister sees that God is with Yosef? So this is where the Medrash is coming from, that he sees Yosef do funny things and everything seems to be working out. Amru ki beroso hatzlachaso hagedola haychoshesh ki derech kshafim hu kasher b'vnei artso ad shirosha hayameis elyon b'amare sheniretz lo b'chalom b'hakitz pamud anan v'chayotzi bo l'chvod hatzadik. So I left out the end of the Medrash. The end of the Medrash says that ultimately Potiphar was given an image of the divine presence in his, like in Yosef's background, so to say, before Zoom. Amazing. But what's this about? So Potiphar doesn't have a context of monotheism. So an Egyptian, if they see that someone mutters things and it works out their way, what's an Egyptian going to think? An Egyptian is going to think it's magic, right? With the Khartoumim and this and that. So then God makes it so that there's an honor for Yosef. God makes it that Potiphar senses his divine presence. Very, very interesting. Okay, let's go on now to verse 6. Vayazov kol asher lo biyad Yosef. Potiphar leaves everything that he has in the hand of Yosef. V'lo yodai toma uma. Literally translated, he didn't know anything with him. We have to understand what that means. Kim halachem asher hu ochel, except for the bread that he ate. Potiphar didn't know anything with Yosef except for the bread that he ate. What's that? What are we talking about? Ramban on Pasuk Vav. So he starts off by saying, so the first prat that he says is the bread that Potiphar ate is a reference to his spouse. In other words, we're trying to sort of speak in a euphemistic language. So the point is that everything in Potiphar's house was welcome for Yosef to take, except for Potiphar's own wife. And of course, we know the next part of the story where there's an allegation that Yosef does do something with Potiphar's wife. If this is the pshat, it brings the next part of the story all the more relevance, because that was the one thing that Potiphar sort of maybe had a little bit of worry about, whatever it is. For Rabbi Avram Amar, Kol asher lo haya biyad Yosef, chutz min alechem asher hu ochel. The Ibn Ezra says everything that Potiphar had was in the hands of Yosef except for the bread. Shlo haya afilu nogea bo bavur heyoso ivri. That Yosef was not even allowed to touch the bread because he was a Jew. The rule was that the Egyptians did not want the Jews touching their bread because it was a disgusting thing to the Egyptians that the Jews should touch their bread. So, very different shot. The Ibn Ezra says that what it means is Yosef had free reign on everything in Potiphar's house except the bread, meaning except food. A fascinating statement. On the one hand, Potiphar gives so much trust to Yosef. How much is this our story? But on the other hand, he's still a Jew. I trust you. I trust you. I trust you. Just don't touch my cereal. But for everything else, I trust you. It's an interesting thing. The Ramban says this could really be the pshat. Oh, yeah, Perishakasu. So now the Ramban suggests a third possibility. Hilo yada adonav es Yosef mu'uma shiyikach mikol ashelo. Rakas halechem levado asher yochal Yosef. Lo l'shar hanaos kasher yasu abachurim. V'lo lesov lo osher nechasim. This is a different pshat. This is that Potiphar was not aware of Yosef taking anything from his home except bread, meaning Yosef could have lived a high life. Yosef could have indulged in all kinds of pleasures from Potiphar's household, and he neglected to do so. He just lived a very simple life. He didn't want to take advantage of his role. So that's what it means, that the only thing that he took from Potiphar was bread. So one pshat is it's a euphemistic language to Potiphar's wife. Another pshat is that Yosef was welcome to deal with everything except food because the Egyptians had a hang up about the Jews touching their food. Third pshat is Yosef only took very simple pleasures from the home. Okay, let's jump ahead to verse 11. Vayehi kayom hazeh. And it was on a day like this is all pshat what that's about. Maybe we'll discuss it another year. And Yosef came to the house to do his work. Fascinating machlokas Rashi brings down. Either means he came to his house to do his work. He had a list of things to do. And the Medrash says, by the way, this was like a day of like some kind of holiday. So people weren't home. And the other pshat is he came to do what he had always wanted to do, which was to be doing something with the wife of Potiphar. The pasuk beforehand is that she kept on making overtures to him. In any event, he comes to the house. And nobody was home. It's just him and the wife of Potiphar. Verse 12. Vatispeseu b'vigdo lemor shichva imi. She grabbed him by his garment, and she said to him, lie with me. Vayazov bigdo biyada. He left his garment in her hand. Vayanas vayetze achutza. And he fled, and he went outside. Okay. I just want to clarify, according to the second shot that we said with Rashi, that he came into the house saying to himself, okay, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to do this thing I kept on telling myself not to do. So even though he came into the house with that intention, clearly he had overcome his desires in the moment. So what does that mean that he left his garment in her hand? What happened exactly? What's the picture here? Ramban, very interesting Ramban on Pasuk Beis. Vayazov bigdo biyada lichvod gvirto lo ratza lo tziam biyado b'chocho agaram umena. I mean, you have to ask yourself, he's stronger than her, presumably. Why doesn't he just take the garment back? So he wanted to treat her with respect, and he didn't want to get into, like a pulling match with her. Didn't want to physically overpower her. Vayeishev so male love. So in other words, if you imagine she like comes up and she's like holding his garment, he could have just pulled himself back, and then she would have had nothing in her hand. But he didn't want to get into that with her. So he just like takes off. This seems to have been an outer garment, like a shirt or something like that. He just kind of not a shirt, excuse me, more like a jacket. He just kind of takes it off and just leaves it there. That's what the Ramban says. It was like an outer garment. Okay, so that's how the Ramban draws this first picture. Being that she saw that he had left the garment in her hand, pachata, she's afraid. Maybe he wants proof that she was trying to make an overture to him. And so now his jacket is in her house, in her hand. Maybe he's going to use that against her. Maybe he's going to run to Potiphar and say, you got to get your wife away from me. Come into the house. She's got my jacket. How'd she get my jacket? So that scares her. He just wants out of the house, and he doesn't want to get into a pulling match with her. So he just takes it off and walks out. But she thinks that he's going to bring this as a proof against her. So she beats him to the punch. She now gives the call, and that's the next verse. She says, when she sees that he left his garment in her hand, then at 14, then she calls out and says he tried to sleep with me. That he wanted to sleep with me, so he took off his jacket and he left it here. And when he hears that I raise my voice, he rushes out. Okay. It's very interesting. If you look in verse 15, it says he left his garment by me. It doesn't say he left his garment in my hand. When she's talking, it says he left his garment by me. The reason for that, says the Ramban, excuse me, the reason for that is that why did he leave his garment in your hand? What a strange thing. It's an outer garment. Why would he leave his garment in your hand? So the only way it makes sense if it's in her hand is if she's initiating. So she doesn't want to tell that to people. So she says, yeah, he forgot his jacket in my room. That's the difference. An interesting shot. So we discussed this morning what it means that Potiphar sees that Yosef is in, that God is with Yosef. We discussed what it means that Potiphar leaves the bread for Yosef. And we discussed the scene with the wife of Potiphar and Yosef.